Good evening. Thank you all for coming. My name is Edward Nixon. I am with Waterfront for All, a board member with that. I would also like to acknowledge that my fellow board members, Ron Jenkins and our chair of Waterfront for All, Ed Hoare, will be with us this evening. It is our pleasure to welcome you all to the Ontario Place for All Speaker Series number 16, in the water and a spa on the land. We are thrilled to be hosting this in cooperation with our sister organization, Ontario Place for All, this evening. And we are equally thrilled to welcome Chris Glover, the MPP for Spadina-Fort York, Norm de Pasquale, Ontario Place for All co-chair, and Ann-Elisabeth Samson, another Ontario Place for All co-chair. And how we're going to proceed this evening is that I will move on next from this intro to our land acknowledgement, and then we'll have remarks from Chris Glover, Ann-Elisabeth Samson, followed by Norm de Pasquale, and then we'll have questions and discussion to follow. You're also, of course, welcome to put your questions in the chat and comments in the chat, which we'll refer to throughout the evening. We acknowledge we are meeting on land that is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and it is our privilege to share this land with them. And now I'd like to ask Chris Glover to speak with us. Thank you.
Long, have to keep digging to get to the real, as you said, the shit. That's what we finally landed on. This has been a dirty deal from the beginning. Therma hired conservative lobbyists in September 2019, 3 months before they actually launched the RFP for proposals. So, you know, the fix was in on this deal. It's pretty clear. And the thing that is really most shocking about it is as we dig deeper and deeper, I mean, first it was the 95-year lease, then it was the $600 million parking garage and the $200 million infrastructure. Then the lease was released, and it was like, you know, Therma had just written every dream possible, you know, clause in that lease that they could possibly think of. How can we possibly get more money and more value from the Ontario taxpayers into our pockets? And so they've got a 95-year lease, $2.2 billion subsidy. Parkland, they're over the term of the lease, they're going to pay $1.1 billion in rent. So they're not even paying back half the initial investment that we as taxpayers are making. And now the other clause that's in the lease is that the government committed, and it's the Auditor General's report says the government committed to having the utilities ready by December 31st, 2024. And if not, if they weren't ready, then we taxpayers have to give Therma a $250,000 penalty fee up to, and this is going to be accumulating, and we're looking through, I want to get back into the lease about how often that $250,000 accumulates, but it's up to a maximum of $30 million that we could be handing over to Therma. So when we looked at, you know, why is the government so adamant about cutting these sewer pipes short and dumping raw sewage into the channel between the breakwater and the shoreline, it's because of this penalty clause that's in there. And, you know, Walter Kem was at a meeting that we had with the showing of the Ontario Place film last night, Your Tomorrow, and he was talking about, like, the plan was to put a kilometer-long pipe, extend the pipe that's there now, a kilometer long into the lake. Not a, you know, it's still going to be some raw sewage going in the lake, but at least it would be diluted. It would be in the flow of the lake. Now they're going to lock it in to this channel. And the real problem is that they're going to cut these pipes short in order to accelerate the project. But the way that you do it properly is you put the pipes in, and then put the landfill over, because where the pipes are going to be going through is right where the Therma project, the extension of the island is going to be, the landfill is going to be. So now the plan is to cut the pipes short, and at some point in the future, extend them back underneath the Therma spa. Which makes no sense whatsoever.
No, they're,
The real danger here is, and I'm going to just, the real danger is here, they're going to be polluting our waterfront, Sunnyside Park, the Argonaut Rowing Club, all of that, you know, where the CNE water show is, the Boulevard.
although it's
all of
already somewhat.
polluted. And we need to stop this now. And so that's, I'm glad you're all here. Thank you for your participation. Thank you, everybody, for your advocacy. And we are going to keep fighting this deal until it's stopped.
So
Thank
they
you
got
very much.
a lot of people. A lot of,
Sorry, if you have your mic on and you're not a speaker, I would ask you to kindly turn it off, mute yourself, please, because unfortunately everyone can hear you. So if you could unmute yourself, that would be much appreciated. Much appreciated. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to welcome Ann-Elisabeth Samson, Ontario Place for All co-chair. I'm just going to spotlight you for everyone. And welcome. Thank you for being here with us this evening.
Thank you so much. Thanks to Waterfront for All for hosting us tonight. And thanks, Chris, for being here and continuing to champion the cause of a publicly accessible Ontario Place. And thank you to all of you for being here. Clearly, this issue has struck a nerve. My name is Ann-Elisabeth Samson, and I'm the co-chair of Ontario Place for All, along with Norm de Pasquale, who we'll hear from in a minute. And I've made Toronto home for the last 24 years and live close enough to Ontario Place that I've appreciated it before it was closed off and now demolished. But I got involved in this grassroots movement because I care deeply about the lake and our access to it. I am also passionate about working to build the world I want for my children and grandchildren, which is a future Ontario that values public space and takes into account the climate, protects our precious resources for future generations, and doesn't sell them off for a terrible idea. One reason I love this lake is that I'm also an open water swimmer and rower. I'm sure some of you on this call, like me, have been on or in this exact water, the Western Channel we're talking about tonight. In fact, I can see a number of names that I recognize from my various water activities. I've spent many hours in this water, in a boat rowing and coaching teenagers as they learn the sport. And yes, I've also swum right there in the channel, and even fished out a few new rowers as they've flipped their boats while learning the sport, which does happen pretty regularly. I love my mornings on this water, and often the area in this Western Channel is the flattest, most pleasant water to row on across our course. It's amazing in the morning, if you can picture it. You know, we're all working in unison, making a boat move through the water, watching the sunrise over the city. It's incredibly wonderful to be able to do this in our city. And I'm not the only one. People use this water for all kinds of things: rowing, paddleboarding, swimming, sailing, triathlons, canoeing, jet skiing, or just to find some peace and recreation in the city. But what we're going to talk about tonight is about the Ontario Place project, but also we're going to talk about how the Fort government is so determined to shove this enormous mall-like mega spa down our throats. They're cutting off access to the lake, and they're going to make a bigger mess of our water. This project is expensive. The Auditor General recently said the cost to the taxpayer is almost $2.3 billion. I'll say that again, that's $2.3 billion. That's $400 per household in the province, or you could think of it as $16 million for every riding in the province. It's expensive, and it's clear the province is sparing no expense in support of their expediency to get it done. It's haphazard and poorly planned, as evidenced by this new shortcut we're talking about tonight. The province is planning to dump wastewater into the water that I and many others use. And we're going to talk about this temporary measure that's being rushed before they do the real expensive proper fix to the CSO. Norm will talk more about that later. And for the water users, not only will we now have the CSO jumping directly into the channel, where many of you will remember Lakeshore flooded right there a couple of times last summer. We'll also lose some of our rowable water with the turbidity curtain that will further encroach on what's usable for us. Our goal tonight is to hold a public consultation because there hasn't been one by our government. So this is a public consultation by the public and for the public, where we can hopefully share all of the information we've managed to pull together based on what we've been able to find out. We hope that this information sharing will be useful to you and allow you to comment and tell the city and the province what you think of these plans. And I want to remind you that this is not how our democratic government should work. They should plan projects in the open, share what they're doing, answer our questions, conduct the proper reviews, make decisions on behalf of the people, not the corporations, and be prepared to defend their decisions in court or in the public. It doesn't have to be this way. It shouldn't be this way. The Ford government should remember that they work for us, the people. So nothing about this project or this deal has been done well. It's a mess at every turn. The Auditor General pointed out the financial model doesn't make sense. It's a huge subsidized business deal with an unknown foreign partner. And in the last month, we've had this CSO cheap fix forced on us along with a city report. The project will increase travel time and traffic on Lakeshore as well. Everything is in a rush. It's all in secret and it's not well planned. Certainly, there's been no meaningful consultation with the taxpayers as the government continues to push the project at all costs. And thanks to their own laws, which we could go into detail about, but we won't bore you with that, they have no consequences. Ontario deserves better. So that's what we're trying to do tonight, is to step in where the government is failing. And with that, I will hand it over to my co-chair, to Norm.
Thank you so much, Ann-Elisabeth. Norm, I hope you have your 496
497 now.
497. You have your 497 slides ready to go.
Yes, I do.
Excellent. That's brilliant.
I will share my screen, and while I'm doing that, I just wanted to mention that local area councillor, Spadina-Fort councillor and Deputy Mayor Asma Malik sends her regrets tonight. She was unfortunately double booked. But she has a bit of a statement she asked me to read, which follows. The provincial government has avoided principles of good planning at Ontario Place. They didn't complete an environmental assessment for West Island and for the new lake fill. Deputy Mayor Malik shares concerns about the consequences of this interim change to the CSO. The province has to show their work and prove that it won't cause adverse impacts in the lake and to users in the Western Channel. And they have to share this information publicly. It is unacceptable that no information has been posted under the ERO's review period. And I'll touch on that, but those are Asma's comments, and unfortunately she had to send regrets for tonight. Can everyone see my screen okay, my presentation? Okay, see some thumbs up.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I chose a photo of West Channel while the Pan Am Games were underway, just to show that this is an area that gets well used when there's opportunity for aquatic sports and aquatic events. And you know, it's a well used and loved space for rowers and other people doing aquatic activities. So yeah, just to reiterate, the province has had 0 public consultations and has shared 0 documents publicly about this combined sewer overflow work at Ontario Place. So tonight, this is a consultation by the community for the community. Everything you're going to see tonight, we have found from, you know, private presentations or other places to collect information, but we have gotten nothing from the province, and you know, nothing has been shared publicly with people, and they want to rush ahead with this work starting on January 27th. And that's why we've made this speaker series, and thank you Waterfront for All for being so accommodating to make this speaker series done before the end of the comment period. So what is a combined sewer overflow? I can try to play a video, and if it doesn't work, I have an explainer on the next page. So I'll just quickly run through it.
Many older cities across North America use combined sewer systems where both sewage and stormwater flow into a single pipe to wastewater treatment plants. But during heavy rainfall events, this mixture of raw sewage, stormwater, and garbage backs up the sewer system, creating a combined sewer overflow, or CSO, allowing untreated polluted sewage and garbage to flow directly into local waterways.
That is the short and sweet video from the City of Toronto on what a CSO is. So because that did work, I can move on. So yeah, just to recap what it said, like combined sewer overflows are very common in older cities, like let's say a century old, and they carry both the sewage and the stormwater. And yeah, City of Toronto has a long-term plan to eliminate CSOs. It's a fairly long-term plan, and it's completely funded by your water bill. The province and the feds haven't kicked into this, so it's basically your water bill. And you can see, the plan to deal with the eastern side of the combined sewer overflows runs all the way to 2038, because it's kind of, as Toronto put it, it's sort of pay as you go. So it's basically collecting revenue from the water bill and feeding it into fixing these combined sewer overflows. So the area of Toronto that uses combined sewer overflows, really it kind of lines up with Old Toronto. It's this area in pink. So this is Old Toronto, where unfortunately this is what they did back in the day. They combined the storm and the sewer pipes together. So it affects this whole area, and there are 80 combined sewer overflows in Toronto, and 34 of them eject directly into Lake Ontario. Quite a few of them eject into the Don, and that's the work that's underway right now to at least stop that part of the CSOs from outletting into our water. But with 80 combined sewer outflows going into our water, you can just imagine what's floating around in there. So this here covers the CSOs that we have, kind of along the central waterfront, and from the Don to the central waterfront. There are 51 of those between the Don and the central waterfront, and each year there are 42 scenarios where raw sewage and stormwater exit out into our water. So it's roughly about 42 of these events per year. What are the problems with this? There are many. You can see sort of like a no swimming sign here at the beaches. Like when these outflows happen, you have floating raw sewage in the water. No one should swim in that. I mean, unfortunately, people who get into water like that develop rashes. You can get you can get sick or potentially die from E. coli. So extremely dangerous situation. It obviously impacts the fish and any other life in the water. Affects, when we talk about life, it affects like bugs and the sediment quality. Can't really eat those fish, right? They are what they eat. It's also bad for fish habitat, and algae starts to grow. You've probably seen algae on the west waterfront, the central waterfront, and CSOs are a major cause of this. And they're getting very bad on the western waterfront. In particular, I've seen in recent times. So at Ontario Place, there are 4 combined sewer overflows, starting at Inukshuk Park in the east to Remembrance Street, and then one that's kind of in the middle here, not far from the Ontario Place ponds, and then the one we're going to discuss tonight, which they call it Dufferin, but basically it connects to right next to the rock kind of outcropping on West Island. It goes to the other side of it. And this one here is in kind of physical conflict with the Ontario Place redevelopment plans right now. Why is that? Because the province wants to rush and lake fill all around West Island, because that will constitute the only public space on West Island. And this CSO is in conflict with those lake filling plans. And they're in such a rush because of those fines and fees that Chris Glover was talking about, that they have to rush into like an interim solution before coming up with a slightly better and much more expensive long-term solution. But that gives a bit of a lay of the land. And the CSO right now exits to the other side of this rock. So the current state of this CSO that we're discussing that they want to alter, it's operational. One part of it is buckled, but it wasn't like a critical part of it. It discharges a mix of stormwater and raw sewage into the lake south of the breakwater, in an area not too far from the current West Island beach. Despite this, West Island Beach usually tests pretty well from swim drink fish's testing of the water there. There are times where the CSO does outflow and it does negatively impact, obviously, the water around there. But the fact that it's kind of a little more south allows it to at least sort of spread out a little bit, and this rock can absorb at least a little bit of the outflow right now. So it doesn't outflow. There are times where some of the CSO sewage, some of it may come into here, but the majority of it goes out this way, and the rock kind of helps also to absorb a bit of it. So the status of the proposed interim CSO solution, and this is a rough picture that we've managed to acquire of it. They're proposing cutting the current CSO from, so that it outlets directly into West Island's West Channel, which, here you see Lakeshore Boulevard where the cars are driving. And then, here we are on that little stretch of land. And then it's going to outflow directly into the water right there off of Lakeshore into the West Channel. So this, as I mentioned, is to allow lake filling activities to take place, which this lake filling is necessary to create any public space on West Island, because all of West Island, as we know it, will be mega spa. As I mentioned, the province has to rush this work in order to meet rushed timelines that they committed to for reasons I can't understand. So that they can hand over the site in May 2025. Like, they are running at a breakneck pace here, and it is causing knockover problem after knock-on problem. And it's not the way to run a project of this, size and complexity. They are forcing themselves to rush through things, and they have heavy penalties if they don't meet these rush deadlines. I don't know, I sure wouldn't want this province to negotiate a deal for me. Let's just put it that way. Right. So Infrastructure Ontario has submitted proposed solutions for a short and long-term CSO solution for review by the City of Toronto and the Ministry of the Environment. And this is why we have a comment period at all, or sort of any information that's public that this is coming, is because there is a comment period with the Ministry of the Environment. This construction is set to take place from the literal day after that consultation period from the Minister of the Environment finishes, and that's January 27th, and they want it to finish in March 2025. So just rushing through this at a breakneck pace, no public consultation, no public documents, and a situation that can have lots of bad knock-on effects. So the interim CSO solution, the costs are unknown, but we are estimating them to likely be in the millions. They're rushing, they're installing like a CSO monitor, which is fairly expensive. But as I mentioned, the plan is to cut the CSO pipe and outlet the sewage and stormwater directly into West Channel and use something called a turbidity curtain to mitigate floating sewage, and install a monitor so they can actually monitor when sewage does outflow through to it. But I think you can almost monitor it with your eyes. If you're having a look at West Channel, it's going to be fairly obvious, and sadly, I think fairly obvious. So yeah, as I mentioned, this turbidity curtain is going to extend 20 meters into the water, and we think it's about 40 meters long. And this is going to be an area that is taken away from West Channel access. And Ann-Elisabeth, you can feel, if you want, you can feel free to chime in here, but I believe this is a section that rowers won't be able to access, and it really, cuts down the amount of West Channel space that people doing aquatic activities or CNE with their, sort of aquatic celebrations, they're losing this space.
Yeah, you're right.
Thanks. So what is a turbidity curtain? So a turbidity curtain helps prevent floating sewage and other sediment from a CSO from making it to the water surface. So obviously that's the advantage, but some disadvantages that vendors of turbidity curtains mention is they can fail when subjected to significant water flows or wave action. So a CSO outflow could be this turbidity curtain could quite easily fail. And yeah, I mean, things like E. coli and other bacteria still gets through. So it doesn't mean that, even though you're not seeing the floaties, the E. coli is still in there. So, and directly into your West Channel. So, it's a bit of a mitigation, but it's nowhere near bulletproof. Some other issues with the short-term solution, it negatively affects rowers, and it's here on the West Channel, but as you can see, it's not like there's a wall here that stops the floating sewage from continuing on. So it starts to impact Maryland Bell Park, Sunnyside, Humber Bay Shores, Humber Bay Park, right? So and because it's doesn't really have much of a place to go, if it has a place to go, and it's probably going to be fairly stagnant, but if we get an eastward going wind, this could easily get into Maryland Bell Park and all of the other waterfront parks. So it also would affect CNE water attractions that do their thing in the West Island, in that West Channel. And it could make things like the air show kind of a less enjoyable experience, both from a scent and visual perspective. And I just worry about the knock-on effects on all the other parts of the waterfront. And because the province is rushing into this so quickly, there's no time to study those effects. So, all we have are some insurances from the province that really, have not really come through in any sort of way as far as this development goes. So the permanent solution, which the province is kind of pinky swearing they'll implement in 2 years, so the interim solution will be in place for 2 years, and they pinky swear that they're going to do this permanent solution, is to extend the CSO outwards, and then just near the end of Ontario Place, which is kind of, they view this as the border of the water they control. So I get the sense that that's why they're feeling it can only go this far. But yeah, there would be some sort of a pump station here, and it would send the raw sewage. So this is still raw sewage and stormwater, but it's going further out into the water, at least. Is this far enough? I've heard talk of, plans in the past where it should go 1 kilometer out into the water at least. But certainly at least this is a little better than this solution. But in any case, they're talking about 2 years. The cost of the interim and permanent CSO, we're pegging it probably, it could be 60-something million, 70 million. The entire provincial budget for CSO work across Ontario is 175 million. So, I mean, we're blowing maybe a third of the overall provincial budget on Therme. Seems wrong. But yeah, and the other thing I should point out is Therme's planned beach is right here, and this is probably, they're planning to be here, and this is probably another motivator for moving the CSO from being right here, because that's precisely where Therme's public beach was planned to be installed. So now they're moving it all the way down here at an enormous cost. And, if the province was going to do this work with the city of Toronto, what would be ideal is actually solving the CSO. Let's stop the raw sewage from going into Lake Ontario. I mean, the province seems to have an unlimited amount of money to spend on this project, so we could at least do it right and fully stop the combined sewage from outflowing into our water and affecting Ontario Place, affecting Sunnyside Park, affecting Humber Bay. Let's at least do this right. Let's end the CSO. Let's get the raw sewage into a treatment place where it can be held, rather than just dumping the sewage further out. There's a reason why Toronto is one of the 43 kind of areas of concern for the Great Lakes for kind of the sewage that we outflow, and it's because of these CSOs. So if we have an opportunity to fix any of these for good, we should jump on it and do it, and we should call on the province to do it. So some actions that you can take. So tell your MPP to cut the crap and release the lease. You can go to ontarioplaceforall.com/take action. You can comment on the Environmental Registry of Ontario link by January 26th. I'll put that link in the chat for you all. There are no documents, so all you have is my presentation to go off of, and I apologize for that. We had to be creative in acquiring some parts of this presentation from various sources. They're just not sharing anything. But we also have some sort of proposed comments that you can leave, which are listed here, and I can also paste in the chat or share the deck. And you can continue to subscribe to our updates as we fight to, shine sunlight on this opaque process that the Ontario government is unleashing on us. And I thought I would end with swimmers jumping into West Island, which they sure are not going to do for the next 2 years if this interim CSO goes forward, because they will truly be risking their life.
Thank
Thanks,
you
everyone.
very much, Norm. That was
You're welcome.
fabulous. And I think probably the answer to the musical question, will this slideshow be available? I'm assuming that you will permit us to share it at waterfrontforall.ca.
That'd be my pleasure.
And I presume you'll also, probably in the interest of resilient redundancy, would also share it at Ontario Place for All website as well.
Yes, absolutely. And if it's okay with you, Edward, I'd love to share a few of those links in the chat as well.
Please do.
Excellent. Will do.
Please get busy doing that.
Okay.
I want to also draw your at 7:31. If you scroll, if any of you are in the chat, if you scroll up to something I put in there at 7:31 p.m. So in 2022, we had our speaker series way back then. We had Lou DiGeronimo, who is the city's manager of sewage stuff. And of course, he was talking to us. You made a passing reference to it, Norm, that the city is spending billions of dollars in the Central East to fix CSOs and also accommodate new development and growth in the city. And they're also in cooperation with the TRCA, the Toronto Region Conservation Authority, doing a major lake fill project at Ashbridges Bay. Mostly to service additional, basically sewage cleaning facilities, water treatment facilities at Ashbridges Bay. And they are building vastly faster than the Crosstown. They're building a huge tube out into the lake that could accommodate a couple of subways to basically, deal with this is to put treated water farther out into the lake. And that at the cost of billions, which, as you noted, Norm, is being paid for by our water fees, right?
Yes, exactly.
The question, of course, the musical question, and absolutely the province, since it wants to, redevelop the site, should you're absolutely right. They have I would say, a moral and fiduciary duty to kick money into this. But the question is, why exactly has the Central West not been as much of a priority as the Central East? Now, I don't have Lou DiGeronimo here to put him on the hot seat, and I don't want to be mean because he isn't here to answer that question. And unfortunately, Councillor Malik isn't here either. Do you have any guesses as to why that's the case, or do you have anything you can offer to us? Why those of us who are Central and East, like me, are getting treated, and the Central West is being left untreated. And as you said that too, I also want to correct something quickly. I sort of said something, it sounded like I contradicted you, and you're absolutely right. Norm, you are always absolutely right. But I was just going to mention to people, besides the CSOs, which stretch across the beginning of the bluffs, Birchcliff, Cliffside, all the way to Central Waterfront. So it goes into like southwest Scarborough. They're beyond that, though, right? In Mimico, Long Branch, and farther east along the Scarborough Bluffs, there are many, many, many stormwater outfalls that aren't classed as CSOs that also allow untreated water to go into the lake as well. So that's another. I wanted to throw that out there. It's worse than you think. Sorry about that.
I think you're right, Edward. The map included a huge list of storm outfalls as well. And we took part in a consultation where there was some discussion about combined sewer outflows, and the City of Toronto was there. And they are planning to work their way from the east through to the west. But the plans for the taking action on the CSOs on the west side have not really been solidified yet. Some people from Infrastructure Ontario are trying to say, oh, the City of Toronto is going to be taking care of that CSO immediately. And the City of Toronto gets up and says, we are not. So, yeah, that was, I think, an important correction. And that might have started the province into looking into this work, because they could have started on this work even much earlier. But of course, they start way late and then they're in a huge rush. And this has been exactly how the province has operated at Ontario Place, starting way late and then they're in a huge rush. And that's a terrible combination.
Speaking of combined,
Yeah.
combined sewage.
Combined sewage approach.
Now Anne, you might want to, Anne and Chris, I'm just gonna, if you, with your blessing, I'm gonna spotlight all of you. I'm also going to, I'm also pleased to say that the chair of Waterfront for All, Ed Hoare, is here, was able to join us this evening. Hi, Ed.
See Ed.
And there's Anne. I'm so thrilled to have so many of you here this evening. Here we go. Ed, did you want to say anything to our esteemed guest this evening?
Well, first of all, I guess I'd like just to thank everybody for the great presentation. I think it's been mentioned a couple of times that we did have a great talk. It was almost exactly 2 years ago from Lou DiGeronimo, City Works, and he talked about what's called the Don River and Central Waterfront Wet Weather Flow Tunnel System, and which is a very interesting project, a multi-billion-dollar project. It does include what's called the Inner Harbor West Tunnel, which is a very significant tunnel. I understand it to be kind of like subway size, a major tunnel that would basically go under the slips of the central waterfront and extend about as far as Waterfront. And it would basically mean that all of the outflow and so on during a storm, the storm and everything else would go up into the treatment plant up near Asperger's Bay, so that essentially CSOs would be eliminated along basically the waterfront, including the Don River and so on. I asked him at one point during the call, it was a really interesting talk, and I'm sort of thinking now we really should have him back because we should say, where's it at? But one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting about it was I said, well, if we were to make you supreme dictator and sort of to, make all the political decisions as to priorities, what would you do? And he said, well, if it was up to me, I would build the Inner Harbor West Tunnel sooner. As I understood it, that tunnel was going to be commenced sometime in the 2030s. There was projected completion. It was something like 2036. With this project being kind of not started well into the 2030s. And he said, but it's all designed, it's ready to go. It can go sooner. And if it was up to me, Lou, we'd go ahead with it sooner, which means that we wouldn't have CSOs, not only at Waterfront, not only at Ontario Place, but everywhere else along the waterfront. I'm a paddler, so the place where my heart resides is the Reese Street Slip over by the CN Tower, where there's a CSO right at the top of the slip. Most of the slips, in fact, along the central waterfront have CSOs, so we're quite used to nasty, icky sludge coming into the water. It's a bad idea to roll or go in the water at that time. Friends of mine have gotten sick. I'm kind of, I don't really have a question here. I guess I'm just kind of saying that it may be that this is a short-term problem. It's caught the attention of the public, and that's a great thing. And maybe one of the things that we should do about it is get Lou back here and say, okay, we've got a problem now that a lot of people are upset about, and we'd like to talk about water purity generally, and whether in fact it's possible for the political priorities here to be reordered so that we would start to actually clean up the lake sooner.
Great point. Oh, I'm pleased to say that we have Daryl Brown, the CEO of Exhibition Place, with us. Daryl, would you like to say a couple of things? I'd be happy to add you to our conversation. I think you can unmute yourself now, I think. There you go.
Hear me? Well,
Yes.
thanks for the opportunity. This has been an issue. This has been an issue that we've been tracking for a while. We had conversations with Waterfront TO early on when they were talking about this development, because we view the water channel as a legacy right for us for programming. And so we had seen some early drawings and eventually were informed about what the plans were for the CSO side and tried to get some traction in a number of places. Eventually, I'm the one who leaked the story to David Ryder, and that made it on the front page of the Star a little while ago because I wasn't seeing any public traction at all in terms of meaning from the government side, in terms of meaningful disclosure. There's a few implications with the plans. One of the things that may not have been mentioned in Norm's presentation is, when this is put in play, assuming that by the summer, if you get sewage overflow, you're going to have a 24-hour shutdown where you're not going to be able to access that water channel at all. And that's a minimum 24-hour shutdown. And then beyond that, the E. coli problem can extend for a fair bit of time. So when we were looking at water programming for this year, I mean, we spend about $500,000 on a water program for the CNE for 18 days. And we're probably going to conclude, we haven't made a decision definitively, but we're probably not going to program the water this year. Because if you have a couple of storms, it could very well be that the bulk of the days will end up being canceled because of E. coli levels. Then on top of that, and what wasn't mentioned in your presentation, because it's not really a CSO issue, is that there's construction happening on the south side of the channel. And we've been trying to get more details about exactly what was happening there, because initially, the way it was communicated to us was that there was going to be a reserve area in the water on the south side for Therme so that they could have kayaks and other kinds of water activities as part of the spa. But what that seems to have turned into now is a build out on the south side where there's going to be stone laid, and we don't know the full details of the extent of that, but it could very well be a significant narrowing of the channel on the south side. So not only do you have this rather, large monstrosity of a rectangular build out on the north side in support of the CSO temporary structure, but you potentially are going to have a fill in on the south side and a narrowing of the channel. So, and that's that's critical to us as well, because they've already allocated a certain amount of that channel to Therme as a right. Which means we have a narrower way in terms to work with in terms of whatever program we want to do there. And we've been trying to get more details. We've been getting things bit by bit from IO, but a lot of the time they, whoever we're talking to doesn't have the details on what that piece of the project actually relates to. So I think there's multiple issues that tie into the channel that could impede or certainly affect the ongoing use of the channel on a permanent basis that haven't been adequately disclosed or discussed. So the one issue for us is risk for our participants and even the financial risk in terms of the programming, looking at the near term. And like all of you, our initial question is, if you're going to do this, why aren't you just doing a long extended pipe out as phase one? And the answer to we've had one-on-one sessions with IO, and the answer that they repeatedly came back to us with, well, we didn't have time to get the regulatory approvals, but those same regulatory approvals would really apply to the current phase one project as well as the extended piping. It's just that they don't want to commit the same level of resources to what's happening on other than directly with respect to the development of Therme itself. We have the same issue on the parking side, where they're trying to shortchange and go above ground and have a substantial impediment, and not to mention a blight from an architectural standpoint, at Exhibition Place to service both Live Nation and Therme. So I just wanted to say we're in active discussion with IO. I have been, active behind the scenes to try and get this information out into the public from a few months ago. And we have the same concerns as everybody in this room.
Well, thank you very much, Daryl. Pleasure having you with us this evening. Appreciate that.
Actually, can I just respond quickly to Daryl?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, Daryl, if you can draft up the questions, the specific questions that you have, and email them to my office, we'll see what digging we can do. We've got a research team, we've got the legislative library, and we also have access to the Infrastructure Ontario liaison, and we'll see if we can get some of the answers that you're looking for.
Great, will do. Thank you.
And thank you, Daryl, for sharing, continue to share information. We want to protect the CNE the same way we want to protect Ontario Place. Both the heritage landmarks that we want to see for a very, very long time.
Thank you. So, in terms of next steps, do you want to just quickly review that again? Because I know some people just would you mind? I don't think people are going to mind. If you could just quickly summarize next steps, Ann or Norm, because I know some people have been coming into the meeting and just like, and I know you put some things in the chat. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Actually, I'll put it in its entirety in the chat, but then I can also run through it. Oh, message is too long, of course. Okay, well, yeah. So we want you to tell your MPPs to cut the crap and cease the lease. Just go to ontarioplace.com/take action. You can update that letter and you can talk about the combined sewage outflow and just say, don't crap on our West Channel. Don't wreck this. Don't ruin the CNE. Let's do the long-term plan. Let's do this right the first time instead of counting on a pinky swear that this is going to happen in 2 years. This is protecting our water, it's protecting Ontario Place, it's helping to protect the CNE, all of those things. The next thing is to comment on the Environmental Registry of Ontario by January 26th. I've just pasted that in the chat. So that's not too many days away. That's 4 days away. So please get your comments in. I know there's been a robust number of comments, so we want to continue to make that number more robust to show that there's concern and a desire for a public consultation. Like, this is what we deserve. And also you can subscribe to OntarioPlaceForAll.com for updates on this, because we will not let this proceed in darkness.
Appreciate that. I know, by the way, sorry. Oh, go ahead, Ann. Yeah, go ahead, Ann-Elisabeth.
I'd like to add, I think we need to keep telling the city also that we're really frustrated. So I've noticed some folks in the chat asking about the city. They're reviewing the documents which were dumped on them right at Christmas to share, to give them time to review the proposed changes from the province. But it looks like IO is going to move forward with this construction before they're able to do their review. And, we're in a really awkward position because of the mayor's agreement with the Ford government. And so, but a lot has happened since that agreement happened. So, it's a very different project than it was back then. And I think it's important that we continue to tell our city councilors that we're frustrated and we want to know what the plan is. Like, there are a lot of outstanding questions on the monitoring and on how all of this is going to actually work. And we don't have the answers to that from the city either. So that's another avenue that we need to pursue.
Yeah, and maybe like the city doesn't need to cooperate with their ridiculously rushed timelines. Like this, the province has made this mess. It's their mess.
Yeah.
Like, the city does not need to cooperate with those rushed timelines. It takes the time it takes, right?
Yeah.
And shit happens isn't really a satisfactory response.
It's a good bumper sticker.
I'm saying it so our beloved MPP can't say it. It doesn't have to. So I just wanted to bring something up, and I'm asking out of a sense of civility and respect that we don't get overtly partisan about this, but apparently we're going to have a provincial election next week. Apparently I'm hearing it's about what, I don't know. Chris, I don't know if you want to, say what you're hearing in the halls of Queen's Park, but I'm hearing from people that it's about a 70-30 chance we're having a provincial election. And where I'm going to go with this, and I'm going to shut up and let all y'all respond. But it seems to me, without necessarily picking favorites, that if by perhaps a miracle, Mr. Ford is held to a minority or even outright defeated, there may be a political chance for a second look at this.
Yes.
And where are we at if that blessed day were to arrive? Where are we at? What does it cost? And yeah, I'm just take it away with any response. Chris, do you want to start on that?
Sure. I mean, it's interesting. We don't know what it would cost. There is a penalty built into the contract that says that Ontario taxpayers would have to pay $30 million if we cancel the project before the property is handed over to Therma. However, the government also passed Bill 154, which exempts the project, the Ontario Place project, from all provincial and municipal laws, and also exonerates their ministers or government agents who may have committed breach of trust, breach of contract, or acts of misfeasance in making this Ontario Place deal. And I see Barry's asked, so there potentially is a $30 million penalty that we'd have to pay, but the government's also passed legislation that says, no, we wouldn't have to pay any penalty because this project is exempt from any breach of contract. The Ontario Place Protectors, this bill 154 is actually a real threat because this exoneration of government agents and ministers who have committed acts of misfeasance after the fact, is a really dangerous precedent. And Ontario Place Protectors, kudos to them. They've been fighting this in the courts. There was a court hearing on Thursday. The judge heard from both sides. He's going to be coming back with a judgment soon on what Bill 154 is constitutional. So we're waiting that. So I see Barry in the chat asked a question about legal channels. There is still that legal channel open, and we're hoping that the judge will see that this bill is unconstitutional and certainly a very dangerous precedent. I can tell you the NDP has committed to canceling this project if we get into power or into a position of minority government where we have the levers to stop this project. It's an absolutely insane boondoggle. It's not just the $2.2 billion. It's the 95 years. It's the maintenance of the public parts of this project that we're going to be subsidizing. And, one of the Nina Deeb, who's been combing through the Auditor General's report and the lease, has pointed out that the $2.2 billion, we're running a deficit in Ontario right now. That's borrowed money. Over the 95 years of the lease at 3%, that's $32 billion that our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren will be subsidizing this Therma Spa. Like, we've got to stop this project. And the thing that, as we dig deeper, it's not only corrupt, it's either corrupt or incompetent. And there's no other excuse. There's no one who would ever make a deal like this, And, Ford is asking, it's riding this high. He's going to be Captain Canada. He's going to be negotiating with Trump. Anybody who would negotiate a deal like this should not be negotiating a deal with anything. I wouldn't trust someone who'd negotiate this deal to run a lemonade stand. Like, it's absolute insanity. And the message that we're trying to put out to across this province, and I see there's 160 people on this. If you could reach out to your MPPs and to your friends' MPPs and your relatives' MPPs in other ridings, particularly where they are conservative, and put pressure on them, and just say, this is $400 per household that is being donated by taxpayers to Therma, while our schools, our colleges, our hospitals are all going bankrupt. We have 80,000 people homeless, 1,400 encampments, and the priority of this government is $2.2 billion plus a $250,000 fine, because we didn't cut our sewer pipes quick enough. That's all going to Therma. That $2.2 billion would provide a year's rent for all of the 80,000 people who are homeless in the province. Like, we could bring an end to homelessness with that $2.2 billion. So, get active, everybody. Reach out to people that particularly in conservative ridings in the outskirts, like the inner suburbs, the 905, the 705, the 519. Reach out and make sure that they are putting pressure on their local MPP. And the issue that resonates most outside the city is this $400 per household subsidy.
I'd also love to add, thank you, Chris, for for that. But I do want to also add that both the Green Party leader and the Liberal leader have also confirmed they would cancel this deal if they were elected. So it's a unanimously opposed deal by all of the opposition in Ontario. It's key to remember that. We're very thrilled that we've got that connection.
I've got a couple of questions. A couple of people have raised their hands. I'm going to get to you. If you've got a brief question or comment, I'd be thrilled to let you do that. But just before I do, I think the only thing I can think of is to propose Doug Fort's back of the bar napkin idea of tunneling under the 401 is so insane that I think it was meant to distract from this insanity. Just wanted to throw that out there. Mary C. Kelly, did you want to ask a question or make a quick comment? I've asked you to, there you go. Oh, you have to unmute yourself, Mary. Oh, she's not there. Mary? Okay, I'll come back to you, Mary. Cindy. Oh, sorry, is that Mary?
Yeah.
Who's that?
Mary Kelly.
Hi.
Hi, pleased to meet all of you that I'm not connected with virtually via social media. Chris, in what you just raised, it did occur to me, could you, Norm, and others very close to the issue do an op-ed in the Washington Post? Because it seems to me that a lot of, certainly a lot of our politicians are using the Washington Post to get their message across. And given that Doug Fort is affiliated with Chicago, and as far as I know, and I know very little, their waterfront plans ran much more smoothly than ours are. To do a compare and contrast, but just the points that you were raising right now, could an editorial not be done there to get some traction and also push back on what he's trying to do with this election and his Captain Canada stance?
Mary.
I certainly like the idea, and I'm willing to work, with Ontario Place for All to do this. I think it's a great idea.
I'll add, we have pitched to some new US newspapers. I did manage to get a letter in the editor in because one of the creators of the Highline now is like an executive at Therme, and he is opposing a casino that they want to build next to the Highline using all of the same reasons we're using to oppose this mega spa at Ontario Place. So I called him out for his hypocrisy, and I got printed in the New York Post.
And also,
Okay.
as a side note, Washington, D.C. is one of the target markets for the next Therma property. So they've got a few spots in mind. At the moment it'll be sort of being billed as North America's kind of first, but the plan is to expand, and they've picked a neighborhood in Washington.
And we were in the New York Times, and every time now that they talk about Therma in the US, they talk about this controversial project in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
So we're giving them a black eye.
We're trying.
Cindy. Hi, Cindy.
Hi there. Thank you for doing this. Another just disgusting piece in this whole sordid saga. But I had a question, and I guess a couple of questions. So one, should we also be suggesting that what the province should be doing here is, in our comments, is funding an extension of the Inner Harbor solution to the CSOs. Like, that's where this money should be going. It should be going to a permanent solution. I think the Inner Harbor CSO project doesn't extend to the Ontario Place CSOs. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So why don't we just say that's what you should be doing? Taxpayer money should be going towards a permanent solution. And two other quick questions. I've read some references to the International Joint Commission, which manages the water quality in the Great Lakes. So how is it that the province of Ontario can be dumping sewage here? I put in the chat, I don't think the extension into the lake, even if it goes a kilometer, is acceptable. There should be no sewage. How can it be acceptable that the province would deal with this problem by putting more sewage into the lake? And finally, has anyone explored a federal angle to this? I mean, right now, of course, the federal government is in a bit of disarray and also focused on other things, but is there no federal approval that's required for this?
Thanks, Cindy. Who would like to respond first to Cindy? Norm?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't believe that there's necessarily a requirement for a federal approval here. You know, an impact assessment is possible, but the timeline is so short that you know, the request, I'm not even sure would get to anybody's desk before they started work.
Ann-Elisabeth?
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of wondering about, aside from an impact assessment, because we know Ontario Place for All knows what that involves. It's quite burdensome, but I just know from Waterfront Toronto's work that there are 1,000 ways that their work was regulated because they're dealing with waterways, fisheries, navigable waters, all that kind of stuff. Is this somehow excluded from that whole bundle of stuff that at least used to attract a federal interest?
I mean, it's a really good question. I think part of the challenge is like, we really, like, the presentation you saw today was cobbled together by, you know, from what we were able to glean. It's not, there's no official, you know, kind of plan out other than the three sentences that are on the ERO. But it would be worth exploring. And if anyone has any expertise in this area, we would love to have you help us at Ontario Place for All.
So I see Tom Davidson has just put a note in the chat saying, in fact, there is a plan to connect the western beaches to the future Inner Harbor Tunnel. So that, I think, should be part of the focus of our comments, that's where the money should go.
Yes.
In supporting the City of Toronto's work, that it provides an acceptable permanent solution. Thanks, Tom.
Absolutely.
I've just sent you, Edward, a screen from DeGeronimo's talk where it shows the West Harbor, the Inner Harbor West Tunnel, basically extending as far as Ontario Place, as I understand it, which you can put up if you want. So that's about all I know. I don't have detailed knowledge of how it would drain. I assume it would connect up with the CSOs further on in some way, but I'm not quite familiar with the technicalities of it. But I've sent you his diagram.
Right. Yeah.
Have you got it there? I just sent it.
Yeah, it just came in. Thanks. While I'm getting that, Kristen, do you want to ask your question?
Yes.
You had your hand up.
Very much for this. I'm a little slow on the uptake on a few of these things, but I wanted to ask MPP Glover about sympathetic conservative MPPs, because the problem right now with the threat of the tariffs, that's taking all the air out of the room. This is going to be seen as such a local Toronto elites issue that people aren't going to understand the impact it has from a heritage and a long term. And because we know that the party in power doesn't, like, the Premier doesn't care about Toronto. He really doesn't give a shit. And now he wants to compete with Poilievre because he wants to get his provincial election out ahead of the federal. So I'm really worried about all these important issues just being kind of shoved aside. And would there be any way, I was thinking of this network reaching out to all MPPs that are conservative, because it is a provincial heritage, even though it's located in Toronto, it's so important. So why could we not think of a strategy that is provincial and linked to people who have history with Ontario Place, who have a sentimental? It would be great to find some way to get at the conservative MPPs and because they are going to respond to their constituents. Anyway, just a thought. I wondered if Chris had any thoughts about this.
You know, I think the two ways, you're right, this is seen largely as a Toronto issue, and that's what, you know, Ontario Place for All has been really working at. And the big issue that resonates across the province is the $2.2 billion, the 400 the $400 per household. The other one is that the CNE attracts people from all across Southern Ontario and some right up to the near north. So the CNE is, the water show for the CNE has been there for, I don't know, my parents talk about it when they were kids. So, it's been there for, almost 100 years. And this is something else that would, potentially be canceled because of this thermos spa. So I think that's something else. So in terms of messaging, we know what messaging to push out to those ridings. I think one thing that we could do, and I've seen it on other issues, is we could ask all candidates of all parties in this coming election to make a commitment to cancel the Therma deal.
Yeah.
And, and put it out on social media. And I think this may be a strategy, to put some pressure on the Conservative MPPs and to be asking them directly, have their residents ask them directly, cancel this deal. So that may be a strategy that you think about as well.
And even if they don't care about Ontario Place, because a lot of people don't care, they care about traffic. I know because I'm involved with cycling, and it drives me crazy, the idea that he's going to spend all that money to rip out bike lanes, which could be spent elsewhere. But people who don't care about either bike lanes or Ontario Place may care about traffic. And could we use that angle for all the commuters? Because this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I was on CBC earlier today talking about how Doug Ford's disastrous Ontario Place plan is going to make traffic worse. 25% worse in rush hour AM, 25% worse rush hour PM, 40% worse during the CNE. He's talking about trying to make traffic better. He is making traffic worse.
Mm-hmm.
It's a gift, really, isn't it? It's a gift. Steve, did you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Yeah. So what I wanted to talk about, two angles on this. One is the professional engineering societies. I'm a professional engineer. And one thing is to hold them accountable on the Professional Engineers Society, because I don't know if the government will do anything against itself. I don't know if the government will I don't know if appealing inside the system is going to help. So that was one question I had, the professional engineering angle. I've already filed a complaint with PEng as a professional engineer to hold the people accountable. Ellis Dawn and the others who would be ripping that sewer out should lose their licenses. And I don't know if the Professional Engineering Society has the spine to stand up against the province and hold them to ethical standards as they should. That was one thought. And then a couple of other things that haven't been mentioned. The shortest run of that CSO would probably be to take it straight out and then build the landfill on top of it rather than put the CSO around the landfill, because as you've shown it on that diagram, that CSO, the long-term solution is to build that landfill and then put this pipe all the way around that landfill. It seems like the long way around when the shortest run would be straight across. And then the other thing that I think would get a lot of attention internationally is the fact that this is a sewage problem, and Toronto has had a long-standing lack of public washrooms problem. We don't have public washrooms in Toronto, so there's no public facilities hardly. And so now you've already got people urinating and defecating throughout the city. Now, if the city's turned into a giant sewer, it just gives more reason for that. So one thing would be like hashtag Toronto toilet. Or something like that. Maybe there's a social media campaign with a 2-story outhouse with the Therme stuff on top and the city down below. Why isn't the city taking a stand on this? It seems that the city is complicit with the province. I don't know why the city isn't standing up to this and saying, wait a minute, this isn't regulations. And if we are going to be, like, if the province is almighty and can bypass the laws, it certainly can't be bound to a contract. So that contract isn't even binding, because the city has shown that it can change laws and violate the Constitution. It can certainly get itself out of a contract. All it has to do is pass a new law that says contracts it signs are no longer valid. So I don't understand why the contract is binding either.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Steve. Well, let's just take a look at that. Let me see if I can share it. Now, it's not super high resolution, so just forgive me, but So this is the, if you can, I hope you can kind of see this. So yeah, the Inner Harbor West Tunnel, the planned future Inner West Harbor Tunnel will go, right, that does look, I know it's a low res image, but it does look like it kind of hits the edge, right? And it sort of hits the edge of Ontario Place, kind of hits there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, sorry, this
like
is
right
from
there.
the video. We didn't seem to put Lou's deck up on our website as far as I could tell. So this is from the video. So it's unfortunate that the visual quality is not quite as good, but you can see that it does go down there to Ontario Place. And the yellow blurb over it says, once completed, the DRCW, which is the Don River and Central Waterfront tunnel system, will keep combined sewer outflows out of the Don River, Taylor Massey Creek, and Toronto's Inner Harbor. These upgrades will manage the combined sewer outflow within the sewer and wastewater system.
Yeah.
It's a long-term solution, unfortunately, but it is one that can, as I understand it, be accelerated if there's public pressure to do that.
Yeah, right now it's funded directly through Toronto water revenue, but the province and the feds could kick in money and make this go way faster.
I believe that's the case. I think there's been some commitment outside that, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, last update I heard was from 2017, so it's.
I think there actually was some money put into it by the city, and it is possible for be accelerated. It's a question of people saying we want this done, and this should be a priority.
Right. It is my understanding that the Inner Harbor West Tunnel is the last is last on the list. If I understand it correctly, am I understanding it correctly?
I believe that's the case.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's it's because the red and green lines on the map that you see that's
the red one's under construction now.
Yeah,
big huge shafts are being built of massive tunnels going in, and I'm not sure when the Taylor Massey thing is scheduled.
I believe that comes next, right? I think that's the phasing: red, green, and then blue would be a distant.
Blue, the Inner Harbor West Tunnel is I think last. I'm not sure why that is.
But the initial phase of work, isn't it? Am I getting? It's at least $1 billion, isn't it? It's at least $1 billion.
It's a very large amount.
It's a very large number.
1.125 billion.
1.15?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think it's the water rates entirely. It's there's other money going into it. Yeah.
Okay. It's a considerable sum of money. So that is something. So really, well, if we can afford to throw money around, as MPP Glover said, there should be, you'd think that the benefit, like even if, let's pretend for a second, don't all throw things at me, but let's pretend for a second that we didn't even mind so much the spa, right? Let's just for a nanosecond go into an alternative universe where most of us think, oh, okay. You would think, if you did it correctly, that you would be working with the city to advance related infrastructure projects that would make this not, parental guidance. It would make this not a fucking disaster.
Thanks for the warning.
But alas, apparently not. Bruce, you had a question, Bruce, or a comment. Bruce Van Deeten? Deeten? Am I getting it? I'm probably pronouncing the vowel wrong. Deeten. Are you there, Bruce?
Oh. Muted. All right.
There you are, Bruce.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say, just add a couple of quick nuggets here. I'm also on the steering committee for Ontario Place for All. Just kudos to my two colleagues here. They're just brilliant people, and they deserve a lot of credit for what we've been able to achieve, as low as it might be at the end of the day. But I did want to just quickly point out, I hope I had this wrong, but I think, Edward, you introduced Daryl, and for his sake and for your audience's sake, I just want to clear up, he's the executive officer, the chief executive officer of the CNE.
Yes, I did say that. I'm sorry. Yes, I beg your pardon, and Daryl will hopefully, not punish me too harshly at the end of this meeting. Thank you. Yes, the Canadian National Exhibition.
Yeah, people start calling in to the exhibition place office. They're going to run into a Doug Ford accolade with the go there. But anyway, the other
Say it
thing I
ain't so.
sorry.
I said say it ain't so. Yes,
Yeah.
Bruce.
The other things, the two things quickly is on the environment, we had actually tossed around a whole bunch of different people. The IJC, the International Joint Commission, which is responsible for the waters in the lake, are responsible as part of this process of how the lake is managed. We talked about the Department of Fisheries. We talked about the Migratory Birds Act. All of these things were just ridden roughshod over. And I've got to say, the federal government, the Liberals, they were not very forthcoming in wanting to do it. It seemed to me that they were distracted by other things like 413 and their wonderful relationship between Christina Freeland and Doug Ford came into play, I think. But anyway, we did contact a number of different bodies and tried to generate some interest, but for some reason it wasn't possible, which is absolutely morally depressing to have to deal with. Toronto is the largest city on the Great Lakes. We have a moral responsibility to be the leaders in how we treat the water itself. We're going to be fighting and screaming with Doug Ford, and believe me, with the United States, regardless of who it is, Democrat or Republican, down the road about the fresh water we have in Toronto, and here we are abusing it with our crap. That's just not a way to go. And then the other thing that I just want to, which is completely tangential to what we're talking about, but I think essential to attack at some point. I say this specifically for Chris and any other politician who might be listening in. NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. Why is it that as soon as we get into a third-party situation, everything gets papered over? You can't get information, you can't get budgets, you can't get anything, you can't find out any information because it's all under NDAs. We've got to start limiting or even get rid of NDAs. Any public money that's spent should be publicly available to people. I mean, there's certain limitations that I can see are acceptable within a contract negotiation. Once a contract is established, we should have access to it as the public. We're paying for it. Anyway, those are my points. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Yes, and I see Walter has his hand up. Walter, I'm going to get you in 1 nanosecond. I just wanted to say, I know just, so Daryl's the CEO of the Canadian National Exhibition, also pointed out, again, made the point that the sort of running roughshod over the CNE's understood agreements and ability to have a certain amount of parking and revenues from thereof seriously impacts the CNE's financial viability. And as I understand it, jump in if I get this wrong, that there's been no allowance for that in all of this. Yet another, yeah. So that's it. Yet another thing.
Yeah.
Walter, what did you want to say, Walter?
Yeah, thank you all for this wonderful presentation about the breakwater. I've been doing a plan for the West Humber for 4 years now. That breakwater is 1912. Imagine when the city was 400,000 people and they built a breakwater because they wanted to have Sunnyside Pavilion there as the Muskoka for the people in the early 1920s. That was their recreation area. We had the same thing in the beach area. People went by streetcar because they couldn't afford to go to the Muskokas. Now that 1912 wall that we've done underground photography of the entire length is deteriorating. And several of the gaps that were left in the 1912 have already been filled in. And I too am a rower, a canoer, a kayaker. I know what's happening down there. What's happening at the west end where the breakwater hits the Humber is you get the sewage water coming down from the Humber sewage treatment plant, but the siltation coming from east to west. There's 1,000 meters at least of land now that's been created through siltation. And a lot of that west end is now even 0.5 meter deep, which means that any possible flushing action that would come from an easterly wind from this CSO is going to be going into very shallow water. And there'd be very little flushing, and a lot of those gaps are already filled. So we're really looking at a bathtub. But the bigger issue to me is one of moral responsibility that the mayor and everybody should be pouncing on. We have a population of people living in 600 square feet, Parkdale, Bathurst, Liberty Village. They can't afford big boats. They have paddle boards. They have inflatable kayaks. We've seen the number of rowers, canoers, kayakers, paddle boards increase exponentially because it's the safety valve for people who have modest incomes who need a place for recreation. It's a social justice issue as well as an ecological issue. And the financial issues have been cooked to the books by this whole, that's why I resigned from my position on Ontario Place as a major landscape architect. The whole thing has been obfuscated. You cannot get correct information from Infrastructure Ontario. I brought up the issue of bacteria. Forget this little screen they're putting up. That bacteria that was already mentioned going to last, E. coli, Streptococcus, that's going to be there for a week, maybe 2 weeks afterwards. I rowed at the Hamlin Boat Club, and we had rowers who were sick. One man almost lost an eye because of an infection. So now we have moral issues, public health issues, ecological issues. And, how we get this message across is so vital tonight.
Ed, can I
Thanks,
just,
very much, Walter.
can I respond to Walter?
Please.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to thank Walter for being so outspoken on this issue and also for your moral stand in putting your job at Ontario Place when they were going to cut down those trees. That was, really remarkable. And it's the kind of integrity that we need to see from, more people, particularly in this conservative government. Walter also pointed out at the meeting we had last night that one of the potential allies, you just talking about the health issue here, one of the potential allies here is Thermont, because the plan to currently pump the dirty water over the breakwater, when there's a westerly wind, that's going to be washing up on this new beach that they're going to be building. So they're going to be polluting their own beach, not just polluting the Sunnyside public beach, but they're going to be polluting their own beach. It just doesn't make sense, even from their perspective, to do this, in this way. So I don't know, maybe Therma is an ally. I think the other ally that we need to get on board here, and I've looked into it, the Medical Officer of Health and the Board of Health in Toronto need to take a stand on this. I've looked into it. The Medical Officer of Health does not have the authority to stop this project, but certainly has the authority and the responsibility to take a stand when a government is taking an action that endangers public health like this.
Are there any other comments you'd like to make, Norm or
Yeah, maybe I'll just touch on Walter mentioned Liberty Village, and Liberty Village keeps getting the raw end of this deal. Like, that was their part through the pandemic, and many of them went there, and that was kind of their local park, and they've lost that. Now, Lakeshore West is shut down to one lane, impacting traffic there. And once this thing is built, unfortunately, Liberty Village is going to feel a lot of the pain from that traffic. Like, anytime there's any minor interruption around Liberty Village, it's total gridlock down there. This is going to be terrible for that area, and I feel awful for the residents for having this kind of new traffic foisted on them by Doug Ford.
It's crazy. It's just crazy. Ann-Elisabeth, did you have any other comments you'd like to share, insights?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a great conversation, and I'm grateful to have been part of it. I'm reading the chat, and I'm seeing a lot of people with great ideas. And we at Ontario Place for All, we really feel like we're in the final stretch, right? Like, once this work is done, we expect the government to try to hand the land over, and once that happens, this contract becomes much more expensive for the people of Ontario to break. And so, join us. If you're not following us on social media or on our mailing list, please follow us, and please reach out with your great ideas. We are, we're doing our best, and we could always use more help. And the other thing I would say is, first of all, Torontonians are Ontarians. I know that Doug Ford likes to pretend like they're not, but we are. And I think what he's doing here is it's a very bad precedent for what he could do, or any government could do, across the province of Ontario. The way that they've used the law to shut down any accountability mechanisms or their own even their own review processes, it really undermines democratic government, and it could happen anywhere. we have been fighting it in court, but it's due to the nature of our system, it's very difficult to fight. And, this could happen in, the Hamilton Botanical Gardens or any number of, Royal Botanical Gardens or any number of provincial properties. So I think that we all need to be paying attention. And I think the call out to try to get this message outside of Toronto is a very important one. So thank you for helping us.
Well, thank you. Chris, do you have any final words?
First of all, I want to thank you for organizing this and Waterfront for All. And I want to thank Ontario Place for All, because this issue would not have the profile that it does with all of the work that, Norm, Ann-Elisabeth, and that entire team at Ontario Place for All have been doing. Ann-Elisabeth just mentioned the loss of public space, Ontario Place, the Science Center. At least two other projects where built public spaces have been handed over to direct control of the Infrastructure Ontario to the minister. That's the AGO and McMichael Gallery. So if this government gets another mandate, they may be privatizing the AGO and McMichael Gallery. It's a very real danger. And so we need to fight for our public space right now. And that's what this fight is. I mean, right now we're talking about the West Channel, but the entire Ontario Place, the Science Center, all of our public spaces are being, stolen from us. And so anyways, we got to keep fighting. I will say one other thing: people who are responding to the environmental, to the IO, to the proposals here at the deputations, if you are writing to them, it's going to go into a black hole. Please CC my office so that we have a record of what you are saying to Infrastructure Ontario about this West Channel, and then we can bring that up in the legislature when we resume, if we resume, whenever that might happen.
And would it be out of place to also CC, your party's leaders and the leaders of the other opposition parties?
Absolutely.
Would that be reasonable too? To their offices, to Marit Stiles and to Bonnie Crombie and to
Mike Schreiner and send one to Doug Ford as well. Send it, to some of the ministers as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's harder to delete from the public record if there's multiple copies. Not that I'm being cynical in the least, not at all. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks very much. And yes, we do. So actually, I just wanted to cast our mind back to one thing, Norm. I remember back in the before times, remember when we used to meet in person a lot?
Yes,
We were at Metro, were we not at Metro Hall was that 18 or 19? Was it 2018 or 2019?
I think it was, I believe it was early January 2019.
Yeah, and we had that, so we got together and we had this meeting that we hosted in person that it got 200, I don't know, I think we were at capacity. It's an amazing. Good thing the fire marshal wasn't there. We kind of pushed those meeting rooms to a little bit beyond their capacity. And that's where Ontario Place for All, this gorgeous little baby, popped out.
That's right.
And and we sort of said, yes, go forth and grow, child. and then within seconds you were able to walk on your own and talk. It was really amazing. But yes, so it was and people like Cindy Wilkie and Suzanne Kavanaugh were very instrumental in that. And as I was thinking about that, and I thought that was like 6 years ago.
6 years ago, that's right.
We're allowed, apparently my friend Susie told me that we're always allowed to -2 for the pandemic, so we could just say it was 4 years ago. But it is astonishing that we've been having this conversation for 6 years, right? It is astonishing. But there it is.
Still waiting for 6 years later.
I know. Well, thanks everybody. We have recorded this in the fullness of time. Well, we'll try to make the fullness of time as quick as possible. We will post this at Waterfront for All. We will also, and I think if you're interested in the chat comments, I think we of course Zoom produces a separate file of those as well, and so we can also probably put them to some good use as well. I know we always automatically save them, so thanks from someone asked that question. Thank you to my fellow Waterfront for All board members, Gordon and Ron and Ed, for showing up this evening and being part of this conversation. And thank you very much to Daryl, our CEO of CNE, for joining us. And, it's been a pleasure hosting everyone. So thank you all and good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Ed.
Keep on
Thank you.
fighting. Keep going.
Take care.